involves kidnapping a girl or a young woman with the intention of compelling her into marriage is still a problem that communities in rural areas face. In 2014, a man was sentenced to 22 years behind bars for being linked to the practice. He kidnapped a 14-year-old girl in 2010 and forcibly married, raped and assaulted her. A task team was set up in KwaZulu-Natal in 2012 to investigate the extent and harmful effects of Ukuthwala. SABC News wanted to know how prevalent this still is in South Africa and spoke earlier today to Fundi Nzimande from the Commission for Gender Equality.
Particularly in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, where it is practiced. I must say that it's mostly rural communities in those areas, and the victims are young girls and young women.
Why those particular areas, you think? Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal? I
believe it's because of I would say it's a reverting back to certain traditional practices, because we did have a time when we no longer had the practice of Ukuthwala in South Africa. But in the new post-94 dispensation, people felt, I'd say they felt contradicting things. Yes. They had contradicting experiences in terms of the freedom that was there, and also in terms of, harsher, possibly economic circumstances. And they felt that they could tap into what the Constitution says is the right to cultural practice, and therefore revert back to those systems of getting young women to be wives, some as young as 12 years old. But I must say that the other thing that did come up in the 90s was the issue that some traditional healer did say that if you sleep with a virgin, your HIV status will leave you.
I'm going to ask you just to speak up a little bit, but the point is, there is a right for cultural practice. Is it still relevant today in modern day South Africa to practice Ukuthwala, or should we eradicate it altogether?
Thank you. I think we have to congratulate the lawmakers for ensuring that Ukuthwala has been integrated into the Trafficking in Persons Act, because Ukuthwala is no longer what it was set up for. Yes. In modern day South Africa, Ukuthwala is about people who believe that if I sleep with a virgin, I'm going to be cured of HIV and AIDS. It's partly that. It's also about parents who feel impoverished or who are living in poverty, feeling that if they can get lobola for their very, very young girls, their economic conditions will change.
Now that Ukuthwala has been incorporated into the Trafficking in Persons Act, what is your message to those who still continue to practice this, and those that say, as traditional leaders that would say that Ukuthwala is part and parcel of our culture?
We would appeal to the people who still believe that Ukuthwala is part and parcel of our culture to consider the facts in front of them, because a lot of research has been conducted to look at how Ukuthwala is being practiced, and it did emerge that Ukuthwala is not practiced in the manner in which it was established between people who have a relationship, but it's a system that is practiced on people who are really caught unawares by the practice, people who feel that their rights have been violated, and that's the evidence that we have in front of us. That is why Ukuthwala has to be prohibited, it has to be banned, it has to be criminalized in modern day South Africa.
What usually happens to girls who are being abducted and forced into these type of relationships?
Thank you for asking that question, because it's a very important thing that our South African public needs to know. The people who have been abducted, they lost opportunities to get an education. Most of them also caught HIV and AIDS. They were infected in these relationships. Thirdly, they were abused, verbally and physically in these relationships. So we have to really do away with Ukuthwala in our modern day South Africa.
What kind of help is there for victims who have escaped from their alleged perpetrators and husbands?
Of course, there are a number of social services that are available to people who have escaped in the social work sector. We also, as the Commission for Gender Equality, do take any complaints and do provide some support to people who have such issues to deal with. And I must indicate that for this development of integration of Ukuthwala into the Trafficking in Persons Act, the Commission for Gender Equality worked very closely with the Labour Reform Commission to ensure that the issue of Ukuthwala is accommodated in legislation and it is criminalized.
How do you, as the Gender Commission, feel about this incorporation into the Traffic of Persons Act?
We are very pleased, but it's not just about how we feel. It's about how those women who are helpless in rural areas where even safety and security is hard to come by, how these people have been taken care of. And I think that it shows a caring government to actually have the Ukuthwala being incorporated into the Trafficking in Persons Act. And I think we have to really commend the lawmakers for taking this particular step, because every woman in South Africa will know that they are important, that their government cares for them.